So today is Chai Elul, which is the 18th of Elul. Historically, it's a significant date, particularly in the Hasidic world, because it's the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the birthday of the Alter Rebbe, so the founder of the Hasidic movement in general and the founder of Chabad Hasidus in particular. And in addition to that, Chai Elul, we know Chai obviously is a big thing in Judaism, generally. Chai, anything, is a big deal, because Chai represents life. So the question is, what does Chai Elul represent? Because if you read it that way, not just Yud Ches Elul, the 18th of Elul, if you read it as Chai Elul, then you're reading it as the life of Elul. So there's a saying that Chai Elul is the day that brings Chayus into Elul. Chayus means life and passion. So Elul is a time we know which is a time of reflection, and it's a time of introspection, and it's a time of trying to improve ourselves and trying to grow. So to bring Chayos into Elul, you've got to bring life into the experience of Elul. What does that mean? Well, there are various ways that you could explain it. Perhaps one of the ways is this. Often, when you discuss the concept of introspection and the concept of teshuvah, people immediately make the association with something that's very heavy and maybe even a little bit, as people would say, umatic. So sometimes it's like a little bit depressing. I've got to think about the bad stuff in my life. I've got to say vidui and all these kinds of things. It feels just a little bit overwhelming. So Chai Elul teaches us that even in the process of Elul, even though I have to be introspective, and even though I have to own the bad decisions that I've made, and I've got to do something to shift it and to clear it, that doesn't mean I have to walk around like I have the weight of the world on my shoulders. On the contrary, I could be quite upbeat and quite motivated to do so. So yesterday I saw something, I believe attributed to the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe, where he says, why should the mitzvah of teshuvah be overlooked from the general principle, which is that you're supposed to do mitzvahs with simcha? It's any mitzvah that you do, you're supposed to do joyously. You have the opportunity, for example, to put on tefillin in the morning. You should be joyous about it. What a wonderful thing. I have an opportunity to connect to Hashem. You have the opportunity to learn Torah. You should be joyous about it. It's a wonderful thing. So likewise, I have the opportunity to do teshuvah. That should be something which is uplifting. It should be something which puts me in a good mood. I should feel a simcha about it. This is wonderful. I now have the opportunity to do this particular mitzvah of teshuvah. Which reminds me a little bit of a story, seeing as today is the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov. It's appropriate to share a story of the Baal Shem Tov. So they tell a story that on one occasion, there was a group of people who came to the Baal Shem Tov, and they were very concerned about something that they had seen, and they felt that it was absolutely inappropriate. So what had they seen? They saw that there was a Jew, a very simple Jew. Unfortunately, at that time in history, many people were completely uneducated. So here was a guy who was uneducated. He was a very simple Jew. And they saw that when he came to say Al Chait, he did it with such gusto and with such joy that you would have thought it was Purim. And these chevra thought that was totally inappropriate. I mean, Al Chait is a serious business. I've sinned in this way and I've sinned in that way, and I've transgressed and so on and so forth. It should be very heavy, and it should be something which a person takes surely with a really serious mindset. This guy seemed like he was, living it up, saying Al Chait. So they came to alert the Baal Shem Tov to this issue. The Baal Shem Tov said, let this fellow come speak to me. I'd like to hear a little bit more. Let me understand his position. What's his motivation? So the fellow comes, and the Baal Shem Tov says to him, is it true that when you say Al Chait, you do it in this celebratory kind of fashion? He says, yeah, I'll tell you that. Yes, it's true. So the Baal Shem Tov says, how do you reconcile that? You're busy saying, I've transgressed and I'm bad, and you're celebrating. How does that work? So the fellow told him very simply. He says, if you had the opportunity to work for the king himself, obviously you'd be happy. Well, what more do you want? You're closest to the most important person in the society. Of course you'd be happy. Not only would you be happy, you would be expected to be happy. Otherwise, it'd be disrespectful to the king. So now, let's say, for argument's sake, that your particular job is that you're the one who has to lock up the crown jewels every night. Would you have simcha? Of course you'd have simcha. Amazing, beautiful. What an amazing job I have. Take the crown, I put it, I look. He says, but what happens if your job was to clean the royal bathrooms or to clean the royal stables? Would you not have simcha? Would you not have simcha? Of course you would. If you're a really dedicated subject of the king, then you'd be absolutely excited about the fact that you have the chance to clean up the king's palace. That's your job. He says, so I say al-khayt, and I look at the al-khayt and I say, what am I as a person? I am the king's palace. Because he gave me a neshama, and he put the neshama inside of me. The neshama is a piece of God. He put it inside me. That means that I'm the palace. I accommodate a spark of God. So what's the difference if my job is that there's a lot of dirt in this particular palace and I get to clean it? Al-khayt, I'm cleaning out the shmutz of all the dirt that's inside this palace. Should I not be happy? Should I not feel enthusiastic to have the opportunity? I'm cleaning the king's palace. The Baal Shem Tov was very pleased, obviously, when he heard that. Chayus in Elul means that as an axiom of Judaism, whatever we do in our Judaism should be with energy, with enthusiasm, with passion. There's no such thing as dragging your feet through the Jewish experience. Whatever we do has to have excitement. Why excitement? Because that tells me that it comes from me, comes from my neshama. It's not just because I'm beholden to a certain requirement. This is me. This is where I live. This is where I live. The rest of the year, there are things that I do. And some of the things that I do maybe are not so kosher. But what I do and where I live don't necessarily have to be the same thing. They say that once upon a time, before urbanization, before the Industrial Revolution, the way that the world worked was that people went home, work, home, which basically means that the center of gravity was the home. And then there were certain hours that you went out into the fields and you plowed and you sowed and you did whatever you had to do. And then you came back home and your center of gravity was home. After the Industrial Revolution, the shift moved, especially in an urban environment, and it started to become work, home, work. Which means I have a certain amount of hours every single day, 100% dedicated. I've got to be in the office, 9 to 5 or beyond. And then at the end, I come home. But by the time I come home, I'm already, always give me, finished. I'm finished. And then they say in the technological age, it became work, work, work. Because even when I'm home and I'm lying in bed, I'm still checking this email and I'm just replying to that message or whatever the case is. So Elul is a time that says, I have to remind myself where I live. I don't live. Where's my chayus? Chai Elul. Where's my life? Is my life in all the things that I do? Or is my life in who I really am? Elul is a rediscovery of who I am in spite of the things that I may have done. This is the king's palace in spite of the fact that it might be dirty. And therefore, I'm excited and happy to have the opportunity to clean it up, so that once again you'll be able to see that this is the king's palace. Once again you'll be able to see this is where I live. This is my chayos, this is my life.